Recording in progress. Looks like we are in the movie, Beep. It's like that. It's like, take one, Dharma, kind of like a blah, blah, blah. Take one. That's what we're going to do now today. We're going to do Dharma, blah, blah, blah. Maybe you guys want to sit. There's some commotion going on at Thubten Kunga Ling over there. So I don't know. Is Sharon? Yeah. What is that she's showing us? The candles. It looks like candles. Is that what is happening there, Jack? Candles? Okay, so let's slowly start. It's already time. So we are here together, so it's good. It's good that we are, even if we are online, we can share this time together. And I found that very, very special that we can do that actually. If you think, just think about it, that we can be on the other side of the world or at the same side of the world, but just a little bit more south. And then we can kind of like be together and then really making our lives, using the time together to make our lives meaningful. That is why it's so important that that we generate the correct motivation for being here. Because motivation is actually practicing Dharma. All the Dharma practice comes by or comes the point of the intention and motivation. It's transforming. I've said that before. I always think the more I kind of like I think that we study, we contemplate, we meditate upon, we start to see that it's a transformation of our intention, transformation of our motivation. That is the aim that we are doing, because right now, we need to first acknowledge or understand or being aware of what is happening to our minds and where we are at, what is happening, into, yeah, the way we work, the way it functions, the mind, right? But for that, first, we need to actually come up with a sense of dissatisfaction, which we normally have in our daily lives. It's easy to find that because that is what brings us here, right? Nobody would be like a kind of like coming to a Dharma center if everything was pretty much 100% okay in their lives or not feeling the need. And that, if you think about it, is quite profound already, because was one of the reasons why the Buddha, when after his enlightenment, he decided not to teach immediately, but only upon request. Because once there is a request, then there is a wish, right? From the side of the person, a wish to see that there is still something missing or something that needs, kind of like maybe guidance, or there is a energy from the side of the person that it's acknowledging, even though might not be completely 100% aware of it, but wanting to change, right? Looking for a solution for their, or looking for something to help them, right? So that is why it's so important. Excuse me. That is so important that we create that within ourselves as well, right? That we understand, that we start to observe our lives and say, yes, we have incredible lives. We have very, very comfortable lives. We have nice friends and family, and we have, material goods, and we have a lot of freedom to go, to come, to do many things. However, just if we observe those things, those material developments, if we can say, and even people, they don't bring, right, that peace of mind that we actually want. That peace of mind that we all experience every once in a while when our minds are a little bit more relaxed, the heart more open, and we really want them to continue, but then they fall apart, and then something happens and someone says something, and especially our family members, our partners, or the boss or someone, and anything can just like immediately triggers. It's just like, it's like how do you say, a lighter, where's my lighter to open to start my incense? It's like a lighter, no? It's like anything that we need just goes like this, boom, and then we have fire, and then we are on fire again, and then it starts the and as we know, fire is hot and it burns. So that is a little bit of what we have sometimes, this burning, The other day I was talking to someone and someone was trying to explain that sometimes they even feel that pressure here, there's a pressure sometimes of of anxiety, And I say, yes, this is exactly the type of dissatisfaction that we are talking about, that we need to wake up to. I remember my brother after I left, my job, and then I came back, I think, to Brazil almost 2 years later for his wedding, his first wedding. He's in the second wedding, but we don't talk about that. And then we don't talk about the suffering, that type of suffering. Okay, so then he just he arrived. I arrived, and he said, I really wanted to ask you something. And I said, what do you mean? And I said, yes, of course. And he said, why did you leave? Because you were in the top of your career, right? I was 24, 25, and I was already a partner, and I was already, starting to make money, and everything was great. So it was not because there was like a sudden, I don't know, I was fired or the business broke, or, I broke up with the relationship, or, or I got out of money. There was no drama, even though I'm Brazilian and therefore there is already drama in my life, but it's not about that, It's not the Brazilian soap opera is already there, but it's like an extra, something that really kind of like. But I said yes, but I felt within myself that feeling of being dissatisfied, right? I was just not satisfied. And I remember the word that I used, it was being incoherent. I was being incoherent with myself, right? And I remember that kind of like really helped me. I have no idea why I'm talking these things, as you guys can see, but I eventually we're gonna get somewhere, okay? So, but I remember that really it was something that woke me up to that feeling of, oh, I really hope that people can wake up, let's say like that. And wake up doesn't mean to get enlightened immediately, but just to wake up for that dissatisfaction and give attention to that feeling of dissatisfaction, right? Without needing the drama, without needing the big things, because normally what happens is that we come looking for some sort of, refuge, as we say in Buddhism, a different type of refuge when something big happens. And I'm not a believer of that. I don't believe that we need to wait until we have cancer, until someone dies, until, we break up, someone leaves us, or we have some sort of kind of like big things. But I feel that if we just give ourselves time and space to be with that feeling, we can recognize that dissatisfaction, right? And I think that is very important because from that very unordinary type of dissatisfaction, not something big, not something, just that feeling of like, well, I have everything and it's still not enough. And it's not because I am incapable of, of getting other things or developing more, or making more money, or find real love. It's just because it's not gonna get, it's not gonna be there. It's not there, right? And I think that feeling is very important that we develop. And the more we develop that, the more we already starting some ways to fight back, as I like to say, that habitual tendency of selfishness, right? Because it is the selfishness which is the mind that triggers all of those kind of like experiences of suffering that we have, because we truly believe that that mind of thinking about myself and my happiness and my wish to not suffer, that just following that mind of desire, that mind of anger, that will bring me the result that it is, but it's actually quite the opposite, right? So that is why when we talk about transformation of the intention, we are talking about the transformation of that intention, the intention of the self-cherishing, right? Of that mind that is literally habituated. We're going to talk a little bit more about that today, right? The habituated of just looking for feeling that hole inside, that dissatisfaction, with things that we think are external, are, in some ways, the habitual ways that we have tried to look for it. And then we are extremely fortunate because then we start to look to find, teachings that start to give us some sort of peace of mind within ourselves. So we start to get free. We become free from um, um, that quest. I like to use that word, that quest, for the external things, the external aspects that we would like to look for happiness outside of ourselves. That's very important. That's very, very special that we start to say, oh, I understand. Okay, I can actually still get the job, I can still have the money, I can still have the partner, I can still eat the pad thai and the curry, and enjoy it from a sense of what they can actually bring me, which is just temporary pleasure. And that's okay, right? So we enjoy it because they are like some sort of pleasure. And it's important. Lama Yeshe used to say something that I love. Lama Yeshe was like incredible of these because he was talking to the hippies. Imagine, all of the hippies full of drugs in their head, kind of like, you need to really know the way to kind of like talk to them, right? So you need to say, kind of like, he used to say, it's not about stopping the pleasures because otherwise, what a horrible life it would be, the human life. And actually, human life is great, right? If we have a correct view or a correct understanding of how it works. Otherwise, it's just going to be a lot of suffering. It's going to be just jumping from one suffering to the other. And that whole of that feeling within ourselves is not going to be fulfilled. So that is why, the Buddhist path, it starts to talk about the once you find or you understand that dissatisfaction, then you start to look for ways to eliminate it. And the ways you start to look for is to, in some ways, to take refuge, right? In things, in methods, framework, and tools, and people that will actually bring you into that direction. So that is very important. Because the more we start to do that, the more we start to transform that intention to only think about my own happiness. And I start to really understand the basic feature of reality, which is our interdependency. We are interdependent, right? We depend on each other. I was reading about, suicide rates around the world and all of that because, I'm a creep or a weirdo, but these things are very interesting to me because I feel that it's very interesting for us to start understanding how sick the mind, is and what type of sickness, the extreme of the sickness, can lead us. And it was talking about mainly about white men age 70 to 80 years old, one of the biggest rates in the world. And some countries like Spain or Norway or something like that is the highest rate. Okay. And why? Mainly in developed countries, is because people are too independent. They don't actually like need to communicate with others. They don't have, if they don't have families, or they don't have a community, or someone passed away, or they don't have the, something activities, they are just too independent. They can do everything by themselves, or or people kind of like give them what they need, for example food or anything, like food or everything, but without actually having a relationship. So they feel lonely, and therefore they commit suicide. That for me was such an interesting thing, because actually loneliness, or that sense of disconnection, or really creating me and others, is the source of our suffering, is the main source of our suffering, right? So that is why we are here for almost 3 months already. Wow, wow, wow. Actually 3 months, I think. For 3 months, we are studying the mind training. And we are studying a text that talks exactly, that was written more than like 600 or 700 years ago or more, that it talks exactly about that, how to transform that mind. Mm. So I was thinking, actually, Lojong or this mind training should be taught in every school, in every university and everything, so people could actually learn how to deal with their emotions first, and then they could develop into whatever they want to be, right? Lawyers, and all of that. So then they would be better lawyers, then they would be better, doctors, better whatever they are. So that is why it's so special what we are doing here. This is a pep talk for us to kind of like feel that we are doing something. We are the warriors of mind training. We are doing it. That's what we're doing. And that is super, super special. So we need to really use this time and really use these kind of like text and everything that we have been discussing through these days, these weeks, months, you know, uh, to use it to transform our minds. Really use to transform our minds. So special. So, 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 so special, because then we have tools to find not only happiness for ourselves, but to help others. So that is why, okay, we're going to get into what I wanted to do today, which is to do the prayers. I wanted to say, I said, oh, we're going to do prayers today because, I'm a bad monk every time, but we're going to do prayers. And then the prayers are so important as a reminder. Okay, that's what it is. It's a reminder for helping grounding us, or kind of like, as I like to say, anchoring us into that wish of transformation. Because wanting to transform and wanting to find happiness is not easy, and it takes time, and it takes a lot of effort, a lot of courage, but we can do it. Okay, so these texts, they are kind of like reminders, and in some ways help us to be able to do that. So as I like to say, they are called aspirational prayers, right? They kind of like guide us towards something that we might not even believe ourselves possible. We might not really believe that we can be free from suffering. So many people say, oh, it's just a part of life, ups and downs. Yes, like the Buddha will say the same. Yes, it is. But there is a way to stop that ups and downs, right? That is exactly what we want, is to stop. It doesn't need to be. It's just not because something is in a certain way, it has to continue to be in a certain way, right? So that is important for us to understand. So that is what we're trying with these aspirational prayers. They are trying to actually help us, right? To open ourselves, open our intention in ways that we might not understand right now. But the benefit of it is that the more we do it, the more we actually start to go towards the direction. And then we feel the benefits, the results of it, and then we want more. It's like in Brazil, we say there is a specific alcohol called cachaça, which is kind of like a whiskey or something like that, out of a sugar cane. And then it says very addictive. People say it's like very addictive. So it's like that. Buddhism is like a drinking. The more we get it, the more we get addicted to it, and we want more, right? But this is a good type of addiction. Yes, very good type of addiction. So if you have any addiction, you transform it and you become addicted to actually wanting to transform yourself and help others. That is a good type of addiction. Yeah, that is the reason. The good is we cannot be addicted to it because the Dharma doesn't actually allow us. Because if you have attachment, then it's not Dharma, right? So that is why is so beautiful and perfect about it. So we're gonna do the prayers so we can actually start, bringing the mind into the right space. And then we're gonna finally do the text, the seventh verse. But we're gonna do it in a way that is still talking about the methods. Okay? So we can think about it. We can think about all of that feeling of dissatisfaction and that kind of like pressure here that sometimes we recognize in ourselves, or agitation, or when we become kind of like, angry, or someone did that, or people did in a certain way, and we got upset and we got impatient, and all of these feelings that is not so good. And we can think about that. The way we feel that, all other people, all other sentient beings, they feel exactly the same, right? So we want to be free from that. We don't want that. So others also don't want that, right? So that is why we need to think about how to help them to be free from that. So if we do it with ourselves, then we are able to actually do it with them as well, right? That is very important. So that is why we do the four immeasurable thoughts. It's kind of like a mind that expands that wish for being free from that pressure, from that kind of like feeling of dissatisfaction towards others. And that in itself is not only the method, but also the antidote and also the kind of like the path. So that is very important. It's everything in there. Okay? So just have that in mind, really thinking, and we try to really bring that. Otherwise, we just become like parrots, just repeating some words, but we try to make the meaning of it. Yeah. And we try to bring it, say, yes, I want to do that. And I'm going to try to do that. Not only hear what I'm saying and what I'm going to listen and how I'm going to deal with these situations, but in my life, everything that I do. Okay. So we try to do that. May all sentient beings have happiness
May
and
all
the
sentient beings have
causes of
happiness and causes
happiness.
happiness.
May
May all
all sentient beings
sentient
be free
beings be
from
free from
suffering and the
suffering and the
causes of
causes of
suffering.
suffering.
May all
May all
sentient beings
sentient
be
beings be
inseparable from
inseparable
the
from the
happiness that is
happiness.
free from suffering. And may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. We're gonna talk about equanimity, a little bit more of equanimity today, but before that we're gonna go and take refuge in bodhicitta, the mind that wants to achieve that state of no more ups and downs. And having perfected our qualities, we are able, we are ready. We are kind of like perfected, we are perfect in the sense of, it's not that, oh, we are perfect in a certain way. I don't like this, because using these words is very dangerous, because we kind of like, we already tend to perfection in a certain way. But it's not about that. It's just like, actually, I have the freedom to do whatever is most beneficial for others. That, in a way, what perfection means. Because right now we don't have freedom to do what is most beneficial from others. Right now our minds are limited, conditioned, so we cannot do it. Okay? So that's what we're gonna try to do. And that's why we're gonna kind of like listen to the Buddha's teachings, having the Buddha as an inspiration, his teachings as a framework, and this assembly, the supreme assembly, as those to inspire us, and help us and support us and guide us. That's the idea. So we do the prayers. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. All sentient beings. So today we're gonna continue, talking about what we were talking last week about the different, because I was very clever, you remember? I was very cheeky. I said we're gonna finish, the text, and then what we're gonna do, for the entire month of September, how we're gonna make it. Carden is very dumb, so he cannot kind of like do any other text. So what we're gonna do? We're gonna need to kind of like invent something. And I said, well, actually, this text is based on a specific one of the specific ways, or one of the main. There's two main. What is the word that they use? He's not coming today. Is the one of the two ways for us to develop bodhicitta? Okay, bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, which is exactly the antidote of this self-cherishing, this cause of all of our dissatisfaction that we feel that right now. Okay, one of the methods, that is the word, comes. So, so the method that we started to talk about, we say that there is the method of, 7 points, cause and effect, or 7 causes and 1 effect. Also, you can see in that translation, or exchanging self and others, right? And we talk about that exchanging self and others, there's normally, or the idea of the process of the method, it's 5 steps, right? And the first step is equalizing self and others. And that by itself, I think it is incredible, right? And if you think about it, I was like reading something about I don't can't remember how I ended up there, but oh yeah, because I received a newsletter from Thubten Children, which is an American nun, very special nun that has she has a place it's called Rasvasti Abbey in I think Washington State, maybe Washington State, so not Washington D.C. And she was talking about that she feels that equanimity is a source of democracy, a type of like real democracy, right? It means that my happiness and my wish to be free from suffering, it's equal to the happiness and to the wish of others to be free from suffering. And I found it very nice. I said, yes, that is very, very true. Even though democracy is a big word right now, and we are kind of like, can discuss about what democracy is and how is it working right now, but we're not gonna use that, no need for that. Because if we actually change and really understand our minds, we become democracy ourselves. That is the wish, right? We really start to become democracy because we start to see that the wish for others to be happy and the wish for others to be free from suffering is the wish of others is as important as our own, right? And that is important that I'm talking like this with this specific say to say as important as, because doesn't mean that we need to completely obliterate or become oblivious or and completely eradicate our own idea of. What we do is that we need to eliminate the way we are actually looking for happiness and be free from suffering the way we are doing it right now. That is what we need to change, right? Because it is the way we are doing it right now is by being selfish. Is by thinking about just getting what I want, just getting my raisins in my porridge, right? That is the way. It's kind of like my coffee with half, whatever, how many halves there is. It's like that is the idea that I start to actually develop, and I believe that this is the truth. So I believe that this is the way to bring me to happiness. So that is what we need to eliminate. We don't need to eliminate our wish for happiness and our wish for suffering when we are talking about thinking about the happiness and the suffering and eliminating the suffering of others. We need to say that actually they want the same as us. But if I start to look from a point of view, okay, of that happiness is raisins, and everybody that doesn't like raisins, therefore I don't want to help them because they don't know what happiness is. Or worse, I'm gonna have to buy raisins to all the entire humanity, thinking that this is gonna bring them happiness. And if those that don't become happy because of getting raisins, I am gonna be mad at them, angry at them, right? Because I did what was correct, because I wanted to be happy and that brings me happiness, and I'm sharing that, I'm doing that, right? That's a completely cuckoo crazy way of thinking, but that's exactly the way we think, huh? Isn't it? It's the way we think. I'm not talking, just forget about the raisins, but how many times we do things thinking, but of course, but I would like that if people would do this to me, or of course, like I thought, but I was just having a good intention. I wanted this, to help you, or like I wanted to be this, or I thought that I was helping, or I thought that you liked that, right? It's just creating a kind of like wish to help based on our completely confused understanding of what happiness is, and how to get it. So that is why it's important for us to start, when we come about equalizing and exchanging self for others, we need to then, I always feel that this process, this method is very funny because we talk about equalizing self and others and talking about, the wish for happiness and all of that. But I feel that also like the second and the third aspect of it, which is the second aspect, the second step, let's call it this, of the method, is the disadvantages of self-cherishing, right? So when you meditate or when you contemplate on the disadvantages of the self-cherishing, that helps you to equalize yourself with others, right? Why? Because you're not only decreasing your self-cherishing, but you are understanding that the real cause of the suffering of others is also their selfishness. Do you understand? Because you start to recognize in yourself. So then you start to actually be able to see, oh, the reason why that person is acting like that towards me is not because they don't like me. It's just because they have the habitual tendency, just like me, to think about themselves only. Because it's simply a habit. The self-cherishing mind. The selfish mind. That's what it is. Nothing else. Let's not put more Brazilian drama in it. It's just a habit. It's just what it is. You know? You don't need to put more cream. You know, it's like when I went, this is a very funny story. I was I think it was actually we were in Portland, I think. Yes, we were in Portland with one of my teachers, Kandrila, 2 years ago. And it was like a hot day, you know, it was like June or something. And we said, oh, let's have offer ice cream to Kandrila, you know? And then you go to the ice cream shop over there, and then it's just like you have that. And then they are like, oh, should we put cream? Should we put this? Should we put that? It's just like, and then she was like, yes, yes, okay. She was just like, you know, very happy. They became these huge things, just like, and she had to kind of like dive almost, you know, with the spoon to actually get the ice cream, which it was what she wanted, right? So we were kind of like making fun of that this is how is the mind, you know? We kind of like create all of these outside stuff, but we just want the ice cream, right? It's like that. Just like let's be simple in the way of observing that actually the reason why that person is acting in a certain way towards me is not because they're kind of like, you know, this, that, blah, 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 because I said that, because they said that, because of this, because of their family, because of that, because of that, you know, all of the, oh yes, because they were born in this country, because of this, because yes, yes, but the essence is because of our habitual tendency to be selfish. That answers everything. Everything. Right? So we need to start actually experience that and check that and really observe in ourselves and say, oh, okay, right? So all of these, as I like to say, shenanigans. I love this word. I learned many years ago and I didn't know what it meant and I still don't know what it means, but I just like to say it. You know, it's like these shenanigans that we create in our lives. They are not really, you know, useful or they are not necessary, right? Because the reason is it's just a habitual pattern for us of us being selfish, right? And below that selfishness, there's a confused, underlying confusion on how things exist and how things arise to us, and therefore we can never find that happiness that we want, right? Because we are confused. That is the reason. So that is why it's so important that when we start to talk about, you know, equalizing and exchange self for others, I like to say, it's so important that we understand that, you know, what we really, all of us, we want, you know, it is to find happiness and it is to find absence of suffering, but it does come from a very confused state of a selfish mindset that think mine, I, me, myself, and I, and that is the way. So the selfishness is kind of like, let's say, the way we believe that we're gonna find this happiness and this absence of suffering. You understand that? Yeah? So it's like kind of like the method or the methodology or the whatever word we want to use to kind of like define that is what we think, or that's how we think we're going to achieve that, right? By being selfish, by clinging to ourselves, right? That is not true. That is not going to happen, right? Why? Because we start to understand, and then we need to start looking into the second aspect of the steps of the meditation or the contemplation, which is the disadvantages of self-centeredness or self-cherishing or selfishness in a more easy word, right? Why? And this is exactly a little bit of what one of the things that we can see and we were already seeing is like how being selfish it makes us become like hypersensitive, right? Of situations that are out of our control or not really, of kind of like that person said that, or, or or when we kind of like, but that person looked at me weirdly today, they maybe they are not okay, maybe they were kind of like, like Howden didn't say good morning to me today, or or kind of like that person today didn't say like hello as they always say when I'm walking towards them, all of these exaggerations of situations and hypersensitivity, that we start to become. It's almost like, we are the kind of like, when we have a swollen thing, like when we are walking and then we, how do you say, we hit our toe, our big toe, like the foot is also big toe, yeah, on the like on the door or something, and then everything that touches becomes like, painful, like that. That is like self-cherishing, the self-cherishing attitude, right? We have that kind of like almost kind of like a bruised, yeah, kind of like that open wound that anything that touches become, no, like that. So that's how we are. That's how self-cherishing is. So this creates so much suffering for ourselves. It's so tiring, right? To actually live like this, to be like this, right? If you think about it, just yes, from your own experience, like oh no, this happened, and then this person did that or that, and then we start to be completely over obsessed with certain small situations because that person said this or because that person did that or because I didn't feel like this or because, right? It's tiring. It's just tiring. And therefore, we need to really start observing that way of thinking, that way of behaving, that habit of ours of being selfish and self-centered and, kind of like, it's not a good way. That is what we need to come to the conclusion, right? But I can say that, and you might kind of like understand a little bit and say, yeah, I can kind of like see, but we need to do it, right? We need to kind of like apply to our lives. And guess what? By just understanding it, by just applying once or twice, it's not going to change much because it is a very ingrained habit. So, therefore, be ready to continue being selfish and self centered for a little while, okay? And that doesn't mean you are a bad person. That doesn't mean that you're kind of like you're not practicing. That doesn't mean that your practice is not working. No, it just means that it's very strong and you are slowly going. It's like going, it's like what we're gonna be, and Jack, yeah, Jack is the only one that is gonna go. That we're gonna go to Laudo, we're gonna go very slowly, walking like this, and then eventually we're gonna get there, right? So it's just like it's just that is the point that we need to kind of like come to, is that the conclusion that I need to continue, I want to continue walking towards that destination of changing or uprooting. Yes, uprooting is like this, taking out. Is that uproot? Is that what it means? Uproot that kind of like self-centeredness, that like suffering of the self-cherishing, right? So that is very important. But because we're constantly like with this obsession, we are kind of like just like constantly, how can I say, defending ourselves, right? We are constantly kind of like in this defensive mode, in this fear mode, in this kind of like, so we need to come to this conclusion that that mind is negative and is suffering from myself, right? That is very important. First, for us to establish that, for us to really establish that understanding of the disadvantages of it, right? So it doesn't mean that we need to kind of like start giving everything away or start to kind of like saying things or doing. It's not about that first. First, it's just about us realizing internally, okay, internally ourselves when we are even in the process of thinking like this, and therefore we say something, right? But like just looking into it and observing and saying, maybe this doesn't actually help me, right? Just starting from there. just starting to slowly transform and change that mindset that completely believes that if I am not protective to myself, if I am not selfish, if I don't take care of myself, if I don't do things in my way, if I don't get control, the things in the way that I want, then I'm gonna be weak. People are gonna go roll over me. People, I'm not gonna be happy, and I'm gonna be kind of like, I don't know, whatever, like a loser, bah, something like this. That's how we kind of like we think. That's all lies, completely a lie, completely a lie, right? Actually, the opposite. It's what starts to happen. The more you start to let it go of that mind of super protective, or as I say, the wound, you start to kind of like being less hypersensitive, sensitive, you know and you start to kind of like say, yeah, maybe this person is saying that, maybe, yes, okay, maybe I can think about it if this is true first. And second, okay, this person is also coming from their own vision of confusion and being selfish. So it's not necessarily only about me, right? So I start to really decreasing that mind. Hmm? I start to read it. But first, I need to say that this mind is the deceiver, the biggest deceiver, the biggest cheater. If you've ever been cheated by someone, you can now say to that person, I found someone that is worse than you. I found a self cherishing mind. That is the biggest cheater in the world, because that is the one that is cheating you from achieving your happiness and the absence of suffering. Hmm? That is very special. But we need to see it, these advantages of it, right? And another thing that we need to check is like how that mind of self-cherishing, of self-centeredness causes jealousy, competitiveness, arrogance, like a how can I say, like makes you do bad things, or like being unethical, just to kind of like get that feeling or that experience, that mental experience of being me, like, yes, I'm correct, or I have it my way, right? Like Frank Sinatra, I did it my way, that one, like this, it's kind of like, yes, but you can do it your way and find happiness, right? Not doing your way means getting what you want. Huh? Actually, sometimes not getting what you want, there's a saying say that not getting what you want is the best, is a lucky thing, or something like that. Is a kind of like, it says like that. Not getting what you want sometimes is a very lucky thing to happen, right? So that is true. That is exactly the idea here in this Lojong mind training idea. Actually, not having what I want might teach me more and might help me more to achieve happiness than actually getting what I want. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? You guys are very quiet today, and just because maybe I'm on
We're on
fire and
mute.
huh?
Yeah, we're on mute.
You're on
But
mute. Okay.
yes.
Okay. Okay. Good. 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 But
Yeah,
but that is like the idea that we start to see the negative effects of these mental states in our minds, right? So we say in some ways that all our negativities, all our negative emotions, pride, arrogance, attachment, like low self-esteem, depression, anxiety, they all come from that self-cherishing, from that self-centered attitude, right? They are just manifestations, of it. They're just kind of like effects in some ways, of that mind that is just clinging to, kind of like myself, my happiness, right? It makes sense. It makes total sense. It's like I just get angry because someone doesn't give me what I want, right? Because I believe that what I want is most important, and the way I want it, and the shape I want it, and the color I want it, and the taste I want is, everything. That's how it is. So that's how we kind of like suffer, right? So that is very important that we start to understand how, these negative, the negativity aspect, the negativity features or characteristic of these minds are. Because right now is the opposite. That is the thing. Right now is the opposite for us. We really believe. Just guess, like, when Sandra and Brian have an argument, which never happens, okay? But sometimes it happens because, something kind of like, and then both of them have in mind, I am right, right? And that is exactly the reason why there is an argument. Because there's two of us thinking, I am right, therefore the other one cannot be right if I am right. Right? That is the point. And that's how we live life. If I am right, if I am wanting this, other people cannot have what I want. Think about it. Right? People cannot have what I want because I want it. And I am more important than them, right? I am the center of the universe, right? I am the center of the universe, and it needs to first please me. And then once I get what I want, then okay, we can share. you know there's a very nice, my brother was showing me a little video, and then he was saying, it's like this in Brazil we have this kind of like thing that when there is a birthday, you offer the first piece of cake, when the cake, the birthday cake, you offer to the person that you kind of like admire the most or like the most. It's a very nice thing if you think about it. It's kind of like an offering, like, you're not just like, getting. So, you offer it to someone that you really like, and there's this little kid saying, the person that I like the most, the person that I like the most is myself. And he just eats the entire cake like, no. And I said, that is a perfect example of us. So that's how we are, right? We are kind of like completely obsessed with like, okay, as long as I have, then we can share, okay? So that is important that we understand the negative aspects, the negative effect of having that mind. Because the moment I do that, the moment I think about myself and I only think about my own happiness, I create that distance, right? I create that barrier. I create me and others. And therefore, I am going against exactly what I said before in the beginning, the most important feature of reality, which is interdependency, right? So if I am creating in that interdependent relationship a way that becomes kind of like bad, it has a bad taste or is like, why? Because the other person is in that situation when we are being selfish, not important to me. Therefore, it's just an object, it's just being used by me, right? So we don't like to be used. We don't like to not be taken, uh, um, taking care, not only taken into account, right? We are not, we want that. We want to be taken into account. We want to be kind of like, wait a minute, I'm also here. I also exist. I also want to have, a piece of the cake. You know what I mean? So that feeling is very important that we start. That we really start to understand that like the possibilities that we can create, right? When we start really, 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 really decreasing by seeing the negative aspect, okay, of the self-cherishing attitude. Hmm? Hmm. So we start to really need to observe in our daily life. I don't know, like it's just so easy to see. Like sometimes we get another, like in some way, like some place, and I can see. I went to. It was my brother's birthday on Tuesday, I think. Yes, Tuesday when we were having the class, and all my family went to have dinner, and I was giving class. And then I went there afterwards to meet with them, and I could see, my brother wanted to go to this nice restaurant, blah blah blah, and then you could see everybody's there with that feeling of, oh, comparison, right? We're always comparing ourselves. Hmm? Am I more than that? And I'm more than this, and I'm this, and like, and kind of like I'm more loud, or I'm more quiet, and I'm more thin, and I'm more this, and I the fanciest, I'm more rich, I am more like, and I was just laughing, because it's just so apparent. It's just like in your face, if you think about it, if you start to look into it. And it looks like a show, like totally Brazilian drama, right? Totally. We kind of like, we could be like completely rich by just filming it from this perspective. Actually, I have this idea for many years now to make a movie from that perspective, right? Of kind of like someone understanding it and kind of like starting to unfold life into a different ways and saying, oh, wow, that's how I thought. I used to think, and that's look how it is. Kind of like from that perspective. You understand what I'm trying to say? That kind of like to look from that perspective of the Dharma perspective now, and how to like make it obvious. And I'm sorry to offend all of you, but again, I'm gonna offend how stupid we are, right? How kind of like almost like not only stupid but kind of like in some ways also kind of like childish, right? Yes, question over there,
It's
Jack.
sad people thinking that way. I have more, I have more. Because
Yes,
I think it's too sad. Sad.
yes, that's it. It is exactly, and I think I can hear Jack, thank you. It's Isabel, I think it's exactly, but that way of thinking is too sad. It is a good way if we use that way of thinking in order to equalize ourselves with them, right? It cannot be pity, because then we start to say, oh yes, they think like that but I don't, right? I don't think like this. So they are kind of like these people there who thinks, this like very sad. But actually, that should help us to really develop a sense of authentic compassion by understanding that the reason why they are doing it is because of habit, because of confusion, because of believing that acting in this way is going to bring them happiness, because of being completely habituated and like obsessed with their selfish attitudes, right? So therefore, when we think and see things like that, is exactly how I like in some ways I felt, because I was just thinking, wow, these people have so much money, these people have so many like energy and so many things, they could be doing so much to the world, but they don't have it. They just don't have the interest, because they believe that actually thinking about themselves and accumulating more money, more experiences, more days is what's going to make them happy, right? So that creates authentic compassion, right? That starts to create authentic compassion and say, oh, okay, so I'm going to do everything possible to help these people, So I'm going to kind of like be kind to them, be relaxed, and be kind of like, like whatever I can to help them realize it. And the best way to do that, by doing it myself first. Yeah, because if I don't, then I become limited, and I become, like a conditioned with a certain view of what is correct and what is not. And then we start again with the same example of the raisins. Because raisins are good, then I start to believe that actually giving raisins to others is the way, right? So I start to become a Buddhist preacher, and I go preaching Buddhist to everybody. That's very bad, you know? That's no good. I always say that to people when people say, but how can I do it? And how can I approach and talk to people? And I say, don't talk. Don't do anything. Just be yourself, right? I have this very beautiful quote from one of like, it's actually was one of the first Buddhist teachings, Buddhist books I read, from Kalu Rinpoche, a very special Lama that came, one of the old Lamas, as we say, that he came from Tibet with His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all of that. Then he came to the West, and especially in France, he had many places in France. And he used to say, stop wanting to be a Buddhist, just be yourself, right? And be yourself in the meaning of just be a nice person, just be a good heart person, right? And wish for that kind of like the way for you to be a good person is to decrease your self-cherishing, right? To eliminate your self-cherishing and to think about others. That is very profound, because then you become free as well from yourself, from your own mind, of what is right or wrong, or kind of like narrow-minded, right? Because it's the narrow-minded of like what is good or bad for me is what I believe is good or bad for others, right? That is the narrow-minded. So then I start to see, oh wow, I just understand it's the mechanics of the mind that this person is actually suffering from. It's just the mechanics. And then I was actually giving a talk, giving a teaching yesterday. I have this group that I give talks to in Europe. This European group, crazy people that also ask me to give some talks. I don't know why, they are your friends, crazy like you, that ask me to give talks. So they kind of like we were talking about I said, wow, I think that is very important that I really clarify one thing. The reason why we don't ultimately or actually we help people is because if we could help others like that, change others internally, let's say like this, we would be saying that there is something then out there that could do that for us as well. So why is not doing it for me? So the entire path would fall apart. Do you understand what I'm getting here? No. Okay, good. That means that right now we are starting to understand that our minds actually, it's habitual tendencies of the mind, right? It's the mind, is a wrong view of our own mind. So we don't need any external thing or anything outside there can actually do that transformation from us. We need to do that, right? We're talking about us right here. But when we talk about helping others, we almost believe that we can actually help others. Do you understand? That we can do that process of changing others. But we can't. Because otherwise we are saying that, oh no, so then I don't need to change myself. I don't need to work on myself. I can just look for that person that is going to help me. And that's what happens sometimes with the look for a teacher. We look for a teacher thinking that, oh, there he is, the savior. Right?
Because
That person.
not right or not wrong. I think it's not right or not wrong. It's each one thinks different. So it's not right or wrong.
Yes, it's more about, I think it is about more the mechanics that I'm talking about here. So the mechanics is the way is that actually the reason why we suffer is because we inside of ourselves create a habit, right? And a wrong view of how things are. So we are creating this, nobody else, right? We are the ones. We are creating those wrong views. We are believing that things are permanent. We are believing that being selfish is the reason. We are believing, we have all of these beliefs. And that is what the reason why we suffer. So nobody can undo that for us besides ourselves, right? I think that we are starting to get into that understanding. We are starting to kind of like, oh yeah, that is starting to make sense. Therefore, when we talk about helping others, we cannot forget that. We can't. So we can even say to others, you should act like this, or this is wrong, or your way of this is not going to be helpful because it doesn't matter, if the person actually doesn't want to. And then we come back to the first thing I started talking about today is that, like, the reason why the Buddha only taught when was requested. So we should learn that as well, that we should just give our opinion or preach dharma, as I like to say, when someone's requests, right? If someone says, why do you go over there to that crazy Buddhist center? What did the people say over there? Then you talk a little bit about it. But otherwise, just don't need to. You just kind of like become a good person. You are the best teaching, right? That people can receive. Your transformation, your mind being transformed is the best way to help others. First, because they don't receive harm. Second, because then you can actually help them in the way of creating the causes and conditions, or at least the conditions, I don't know if the causes, but the conditions for them to transform themselves. Makes sense what I'm saying? Yes?
Yes.
You're
Yeah.
going to
By
you're going to say
example.
something?
Well, yeah, you're saying you can't help anybody, but then what is the great compassion? I mean, the bodhicitta that you're going to help lead all to enlightenment.
So what we want to achieve when we are a Buddha is that we have three main things, main characteristics. We have wisdom, perfected wisdom. Therefore, what we have is that we are not fooled anymore. So we are not cheated. Okay? So that's what we have. It's the first characteristic of the wisdom mind. Okay? So the perfected wisdom mind of the Buddha is that there is not cheated anymore by the afflictions, by kind of like this wrong views. So I am free. Okay? Therefore, that already implies that I'm not going to make anybody suffer. I'm not going to hurt anyone. Because what makes me hurt others is my wrong view. Right? Because I believe that this person doesn't like raisins, so she's my enemy. Right? If I don't have that attachment to raisins, there's no enemy. You understand? So that is the first thing. But the second aspect of the mind of the wisdom of the mind of the Buddha is what we call omniscience. And omniscience is the mind that can help others to purify, okay, by knowing, by understanding their own karma. So that means I, as a Buddha, can see your habitual tendencies and patterns that you have that makes you suffer. So therefore, I'm going to help you to create circumstances and conditions for you to be free from these habitual tendencies and habitual patterns. Does it make sense?
Yes and no. So
Okay.
I kind of know what you're saying, but I don't think you're saying that I should wait till I'm a Buddha before I try to help anybody.
Not at all. Exactly. Exactly. So that is kind of like is the like, let's say, the pro level. Yes, but we don't need to wait to be a pro, or there's no way to be a pro if we don't actually go through the other steps in order to become a pro. Right? There's no way. You can't become a pro just by saying, oh, tomorrow I'm a pro. You can do that, right? If I want to be a swimmer, or you want to be whatever, kind of like, you need to train, you need to do it. So that is the training. So that's what we do. We try to help from the wisdom that we have now. And we're going to make mistakes quite a lot. And then what we do, just keep doing it. Learning from these mistakes based on that intention, so we can transform more and more our minds towards becoming a pro. And when we become a pro, then it becomes easy. Then there's no effort anymore. It's just emanating, let's say, like this from us, right? So there's no effort. That is, I think, the idea. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So that is very important, that we start to understand when we talk about, the negativities of the self-cherishing. It's a little bit about that. It's a little bit of understanding these parts, but also we need to start understanding the advantages of thinking and cherishing others. Okay? So that's what we're going to start, like a little bit of what I said today about the idea of cherishing others. It needs to be understood in that context of help that we just discussed. It's not about cherishing others means that we will be able to go inside of that person and change, their minds and make them free from suffering. It's not like a cancer that you can just open and take it out. It's not like that, right? It's just it's a habitual tendency, it's a mind. It's inside of the mental continuum, which is, is inside of our consciousness, which has no form. It's not a material thing. Therefore, we cannot necessarily do something like physically to them. You understand? And even saying something doesn't necessarily will be heard. Because why? Like we have one, two, three, we have 5 people at the center, we have more 8 people here, so we have like 12 people maybe here or more. We are all having a completely different experience of this class. So you're all hearing through your own filters, your own habitual tendencies. Therefore, it doesn't matter in some ways. It's not doesn't matter. I don't need to be so extreme, but it doesn't necessarily means that what we do and say will help others. Because even the Buddha, at the time of the Buddha, there's many stories about people that wanted to kill the Buddha, people that want to poison the Buddha, people that wanted to kind of like not believe the Buddha. So imagine someone that had the power of helping others through that mind that would see what is most beneficial, saying, oh, that person has the tendency of getting attached to these and these and these. Okay, so I'm going to create a situation where they can learn so they can become disattached by that. Yeah? Unattached by that. So that's what the Buddha can do. That's the power of the mind of the Buddha. And then I'm going to create a situation where they can learn the Dharma so they can actually, transform their minds. So if you think about it, us right now, many times, even though we're going to try to help, we might also not be able to, might not be effective. Especially if we start preaching and the other person doesn't ask you anything. Didn't ask you to say anything, right? So here's an important moment, to say, yes, dear, you have a question.
So I have I can't forget about the dinner party that you went to, that very nice restaurant.
Italian restaurant.
Do you go dress as a monk?
Yeah. And it was very funny because like I just entered the restaurant and there was like 2 tables and it was like a long restaurant, so I was just like looking for my family, because I arrived at like when we finished the class, like 9:30 or something like this here, the time in Brazil because an hour later. So I was a bit like kind of like a bit lost in other days, and someone said, you the brother of Lucas. Lucas is my brother. And I was like, yes, kind of like, and then because it was a guy, there was very, like, that's what I honestly, that for me is the moments that I don't doubt karma at all. So it's a guy that my brother kind of like met a few times, and he's like, they work together because of something, and they don't work together anymore, just like in a project or something. And he talked about me, and these guys kind of like very fond of Buddhism. He's not a Buddhist himself, but he likes a lot of Buddhism. And this guy meets me, and he's like, wow. And then, and then he kind of like, yes, you're like a brother. My brother talked so much about you. Like I asked so many questions about you, and I said, oh, my brother is here. And then he was like, oh, wow. So he's like, that person was there, right? Recognizing me. So that I feel that is the power of the intention of that person, of wanting to change, of wanting to work on himself, of wanting like that, not only created in this life, but in previous lives, that makes him meet a monk in the biggest city, Sao Paulo, with 25 million people in the same restaurant, in the same night, right?
So my interest is more the other friends who are all showing off to
Yes.
see who's the richer, who's the
Yes.
more trendy, who's the most fashionable. So you go in, how do you face regular people who are playing the
I know.
regular games when you are totally out of the game? How does that
Well,
work?
because of equalizing self and others. I'm not kind of like trying to be the pure one here, but it's really
No,
that.
it's very interesting.
You know, it's just that. It's just honestly, because if I am putting myself into a pedestal that I'm the pure one and I know best, right? Then it just makes everything wrong already. I'm suffering and I'm just like them, exactly like them, doing exactly the same, right? So it's transforming that mind and understanding and say, oh wow, these people really believe that this is going to bring them happiness, right? It's like it really they really, it's not that they are bad people, not that they really believe that doing that is the really is going to be. So then this creates a lot of compassion, a lot of compassion. As I say, you know, it always makes me, I'm already starting to get emotional, but always get me emotional when I talk about that. If you understand that the source of all the suffering in the world comes from a wrong view, a view of not understanding how reality and how things are and the way things appear to us being completely disunited. There's no harmony, disharmony of these two things. There's only compassion that arises, right? Because that is the cause of all the suffering that we are experiencing in the world right now. So when you see these people, you just say, wow, right? It's like, I am suffering like this, and I can see that they are also suffering like that. May I be able to kind of like do whatever it is to reduce that. So what I try to do is that I just talk to them and I say, oh yes, I like all that, but you know, but sometimes I just feel that maybe not like this, you know, and I just kind of like give a little comment, and because I'm dressed like that, maybe people listen a little bit more, you know, or people get interested and people ask me a lot of questions, right? I try to ask them questions as well, but really on a more directed, you know, way of kind of like not just asking kind of like, oh yes, you know, I also ask a lot about the job, about this and about, you know, and I say, oh, but are you happy in your job? You know, when they talk about the job and they're like, oh, what do you do? What this? But are you happy? You know, do you feel fulfilled? You know, just go like this, just to spark in them. It's gonna make a difference. Maybe not in this life. Maybe in 10 lives, they're gonna be like, huh, I don't feel fulfilled being a lawyer anymore, or being a, you know, that. You just start from where you are. Does it make sense? Yes?
Very, very poignant, very
Yes.
interesting, because
Yes.
what you said is the only place, is the only angle that could
Yes.
make it work.
That's it.
That
Yes.
how
Yes.
can I, that
Yes.
understanding, having that compassion, because
Yes.
the minute I know the way and they don't, that's
Yes.
another type of
Yes.
self-cherishing.
Yes, and it's another
Yeah,
creation of the mind. It's just
I
like, that's
understand.
why I say you just try to go towards harmonizing with reality, right? How to harmonize with reality. That is reality, that we are all suffering, confused, being selfish. Therefore, that is the way that we kind of like, if we go from there, and we are interdependent, we need each other to be happy. If you go from these understandings, slowly you go building up and being clever, being kind of like creative, not clever, creative, right? Because I'm not clever, I'm stupid, but like creative with ways to really, help others, right?
Thank you.
Yes, Deb.
Yeah, I had an experience of receiving compassion that was moving to me. I was visiting my nephew, and his son was crying, and I was trying to comfort him, but he wasn't really responding. And then, of course, he turned to his dad, and then my other nephew, who's his uncle, who sees them. He sees them all the time. I haven't seen him since May, and so I guess my nephew saw that I was a little hurt, that I couldn't comfort him, and then he said to me, "Oh, well, every time my father-in-law is seen by his granddaughter, she bursts into tears." So, and he said, I think, to show me something, about babies, and how it was just moving that, like, he showed me this compassion, even though I
Yes.
wasn't having a meltdown about it or anything. But
Yes.
it struck me that, like, oh, I thought I'd go and tell him a little about Buddhism, and he
Yes.
gave me a really good teaching.
Yes. But why do you think like that is the beauty of it is like what happened is that he thought about you. That's what
Yeah,
transformed the relationship, right?
yes.
That what transformed that situation was that he thought about your feelings and then he wanted you to feel well. And then that's when it kind of like it created that positive effect on you, right? So it's exactly like that. If we change that mind that is obsessed about us, you know, he could have just thought about him and about the baby and like my family, my day, my and
Mm.
you know, he would be just kind of like obsessed about it, so he would not maybe a big deal of it. But he saw you and he knows you, and then he saw the situation, and then he kind of like wanted you to have a good experience, right? So
Mm.
then that's
Yes.
how it is. That is exactly a perfect example of the power that we can actually bring to others. Hmm? The
Yeah.
way that we can actually by transform small situations into situations of love and compassion and kindness. But as I like to say, we don't need to be stupid compassion, right? We don't need to also
Mm.
just think that compassion is being fluffy or anything. If it is sometimes giving, you know, a little kind of like a, you know, nudge, a little bit stronger nudge, it's like that's okay as well, you know? It's just like, but we just need to understand that. We just need to really understand what is the motivation behind. That is what it is. And then we are free to do all of these things. Yeah.
It helped me see my own hypersensitivity. It's like
Yes,
what was I
exactly.
expecting? I hadn't seen
Yes.
the baby since May. Like that
Yes,
he
yes. The creation of the story
yes.
that you created that will making you he made you see the Brazilian drama you were creating and then making you suffer. You know, that's what it is. That's what it is. That's very good. That's you know, it's like that's how you kind of like, look at the Brazilian drama here. You know, it's like a TV channel. Ding ding. It's like, oh, no need for the Brazilian drama, you know? So that's very good. Thank you so much, David. That's very kind of you for sharing. Okay, sweethearts, I think that's it for today. And then next Thursday we're gonna do we're gonna do another talk, and then we're gonna try to evolve a little bit more on the on the 5 steps of the exchanging self and others. And then I know we are very silent because Bob is feeling a little bit sick, so no questions from Bob today. So don't think that he's not there, but he's
You
there.
don't have any questions because you can't see me because I can't get my camera to work. And I didn't want to interrupt blindly. But
I thought
actually,
it was.
the last question was going to be the question that I was going to ask. So thank you very, very much. That was great.
Oh, okay, good. Very, very good. Okay, so then we just try to dedicate. You know, dedication is the same as motivation in some ways, just the opposite of motivation, as I like to say, or the same. It's like the ending link. It's kind of like, you know, it's like the ending point of the motivation. You know, motivation is the start, and then the dedication is like the ending point. Because the dedication is to means that we make sure that everything that we kind of like planted, everything that we kind of like, you know, cultivated right now during this more than an hour here together, that it really brings the result of benefit to others, right? So we need to make sure that we're going to do that by really applying those teachings in our lives, you know, and whatever context, in whatever, you know, situation with whoever we are with, whom, like, you know, whatever type of people, whatever type of fancy restaurant we are with, you know, we just try to really use that in our minds and in our daily lives so we can really bring some more benefit to this world. And we dedicate, you know, that if we would not be able to even learn about these things if it was not for people like, you know, our teachers, especially His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, that created, like, you know, those kind of like conditions for us to receive those teachings. And especially the most important like condition that they created is by transforming their own minds, right? That's what they did. So we can become just like them, transforming our own minds, so we can create more and more conditions for others to also find, you know, these tools and develop even more. So that's what we kind of like dedicate for. And we dedicate, you know, for Thubten Kunga Ling to also have a long and healthy life. You know, with all the conditions for the center to continue existing, and, you know, people, all of the necessary resources, especially people like you know, coming and helping and participating and engaging, so we can, this place can continue to exist. So we're just gonna do a very short dedication, because I really want to do this dedication for His Holiness. So we're gonna do here. Where's the dedication? It's 36, I think, yes. So with that, we just make these dedication prayers as well, aspiration dedicating prayers. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. In the land encircled by the snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chandrizik Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. Rinpoche changed a little bit this prayer and said, in the world, in all the realms of existence, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chandrizik Tenzin Gyatso, you please remain until samsara ends. And then we have the swift return for Lama Zopa Rinpoche, so Rinpoche can come back. And as I said, we're gonna go Rinpoche hunting, in October. So we hope that we can find Rinpoche soon, so he can continue helping us. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Lojong, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you are the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, Venerable Guru, to you I make this request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss! Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean, of the three jewels, and the great ways of bodhicitta, of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. So thank you very, 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 very much. I see you all on Sunday, if you are alive. And I see you very, very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Get well, Bob, and thank you so much, Jack, and everybody who's at the center for being there. Sharon and Roy and Isabel, everybody who's there. I always forget your name, sweetheart. Remind me your name.
Juliet.
No.
Charlotte.
Jalet. Yes.
But if you forget Julie is my second name. So
Julie. No, never forget again. Julie it is. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. Bye, Margaret. Bye, Sandra. Bye. Bye, Dave. Bye.
So now it sounds like Charlotte.
It's Zhaleh. Charlotte.
Yeah, it's a combination of Charlotte and
Yeah.
Juliet.